Hi everyone. Today I have the amazing Emily Penton on, and I'm gonna link her video. We did an interview together with Scott, so I'll link that below. You can go and hear about her story. You should really listen because honestly, this woman has come through the depths of of hell with her story and has truly healed herself and is now healing the world. And we're going to talk more about some of the underlying issues people have that are not related to diet and how sometimes we need to go a little bit deeper. So, Emily, please tell people a little bit more about what you do and what you are finding some more success with.
Yeah, I just kind of fell into this coaching and I just started meeting the needs of the people that came to me. And then I started seeing a pattern. I started recognizing that people were coming to me to help manage their addiction to sugar and processed foods and to really get out of that. Like they started to see that animal meat and animal fat was the key to their health and that they felt so much better when they did it, but they would only be able to string together like 3 days and then they would go binge and not just a little bit, like copious amounts of like chocolate and chips and everything. And then they would repeat the cycle and feel horrible. And so they come to me whenever they're at their wits' end. And the work that I do is very intense. It's daily, like individual coaching. It's not just like you check a box or, you read an email, like I'm there in it with you. And what I found, unfortunately, is that there is a lot of underlying trauma, a lot of childhood or teenage rapes, a lot of I would say like a difficult childhood where like their father or their mother always told them that they weren't good enough. And then I'm also seeing a lot of relational trauma where they had like a narcissistic or an abusive spouse, and or even a sibling that always told them that they were worthless and useless. And so that's what happens is they get these 3 days, they're doing so good, or even a couple of weeks, and then those voices come in and they start to be like, I'm worthless, I'm useless. And then that's whenever they turn to their only comfort because food has actually been a coping technique. And so you can't just like rip out that coping technique of sugar and expect them to thrive. And so I've been able to work specifically on those things to release and remove those. And then they're able to really knock it out of the park. They're doing great.
What are some of the successes that you've seen once people are able to dive deeper and start working on their traumas?
Um, One thing I just had a new client, and she wasn't even, I think she was like a week in, and she was just like, this is what I needed. And I was just like, okay, you just needed some coaching. And she goes, no, you're not just coaching. You're here with me. You are in the battle with me because she knows that she can message me at any time and let me know. And so she was like, it's like you moved in with me, like you're in my thoughts with me. And then throughout the day, I remember what you said, and I am not fighting this battle alone. And I was just like, whoa, like that's amazing that that was her experience. And I've heard that across the board from clients who are like 6 months later, they're like, I remembered what you said. And so I really get in there and I start to um, call out the lies. And so they tell me what they're thinking, what their, voices are telling them in their heads. And I'm like, is that true? No. Then why are you acting like it's true? Why are you behaving like it's the truth? It's not true that you're useless. It's not true that you're never going to accomplish anything. Um, And so what I found is that, all of the people that have worked with me have found that they are stronger than they realized. And so it just empowers them to continue to go forward. And they really do need a lot at the beginning. And that's why it's 8 weeks. And then my weekly meetings, they have that for life. You get that link for life. I am there at that weekly meeting every week forever. And well, for the life of the program, my husband and I are thinking we'll probably do this for about a decade. And then you can pop back in 6 months. But most people, they do the intense work at the beginning and then they don't need as much help. And that's really cool because I don't want them depending on me. I want them to realize their power.
Do you incorporate nutrition as part of your coaching, or do you keep it separate until you've done the deep work?
No, we start with nutrition because whenever their brains are inflamed on sugar and processed foods, we could talk all day long. And it's like their brain just isn't functioning properly. It's not until we can really clear out that noise that we can really get into the work. And that's whenever some of that stuff comes to the surface. I think I picture it like like a, a rebellious teenage child that's just like, no, like, give me my sugar. I want to have this. I want to have that. And so whenever that comes to the surface, those emotions come to the surface, and then we can really deal with what's going on. Instead of somebody being like, no, I'm okay. No, everything's fine. I'm all right. They get to the point where they can't have that face anymore, that mask. And then they realize, okay, I gotta be honest and really face the the demons that are continuing this cycle of the sugar and the processed foods.
Wow, that's amazing. So, have you seen a link between cravings and childhood trauma in terms of like the worse the trauma is, the worse the cravings tend to be?
Yes, because that is the only comfort that they've had, especially if it was a parent, or if it was an adult and then the parents allowed, even if the parents didn't know that the abuse was happening, the perception of the child was, I should be protected by my parents. Why don't my parents know that this person is abusing me? And so their only comfort is sugar, and processed foods. And it's this false comfort in that, it creates this addiction and it creates, metabolic disorders and everything else. And they recognize that now as an adult, but that little child in them is still like clinging to that comfort. And so we just reframe that, and we rewire those connections to recognize, okay, you're not in fight or flight mode. You are not in survival mode. You are a 50-year-old woman and you are not being abused right now. You don't have to turn to sugar. You don't have to turn to processed foods. And it's not easy. It takes a while. And that's why I love being the scaffolding where I can, be the framework around this. I can really hold their hand through this process. And then it's like I let one finger off and then one finger off and then one finger off. And then they're standing on their own. They're totally doing it on their own. And that's my favorite part.
That must be such an amazing feeling. Do you find that people start to change their habits automatically without much input from you once you've already got them past a certain threshold and they're already starting to feel more confident and independent? Like, are there things that they do that kind of surprise you? That like, wow, I'm feeling so good. I'm doing this and I'm doing that.
Actually, it's kind of a little bit of a reverse psychology that I do, is I ask them what they think they should do. And they're like, you're the coach. You're supposed to tell me what to do. And I'm like, yeah, but that would be reading from my playbook. And the Emily playbook is not going to be the same as the Annabel playbook. And it's so important for me to create that foundation that they know that they are their superpower. It's not me. It's not me. All I'm doing is reminding them of how powerful they are. And they come up with the best ideas. I'm always blown away with their like, for instance, I have someone right now and their work schedule on Tuesday is very difficult. And so she keeps having these difficult days on Tuesday. And I'm like, let's make Tuesday a celebration. And she was like, huh? I was like, let's make it a special day. What could you do to, really bless yourself on Tuesday, to know you're going to have a tough day on Tuesday because of the different places you have to go with your job? What could you do extra? And she was like, I could just pack extra fat on Tuesday. And I was like, there you go. Like, they have the ideas inside of them. It's just like I have to give them permission to think, give them permission to, and empower them to implement those ideas. And they do it. And then they come back to me and they're like, hey, I did this and it worked. And I'm like, that was such a great idea. You came up with that.
Okay. So let's say there's someone, for example, more similar to me, or in fact, quite a lot of people that I've seen and come across, who they're not having an issue with sticking to the carnivore diet, and on the surface everything seems okay, but deep down inside they do still have some kind of a childhood trauma, but they are making things work for them. What kind of suggestions would you have for someone like that?
Mm. I would just start where you're at, and you will know whenever you're ready to go to that next step. And that's why whenever people are like not ready to do the work, I just tell them that's okay. You're not behind. You're just not ready to let go of that trauma. You're not ready to let go of that thing because it is work. It is work. It's hard to really revisit those thoughts, those feelings. But you get to the point where you are at a crossroads and you're like, hmm, I can't keep sweeping this under the rug. I've got to deal with this, because it's going to rear its ugly head again. Like there's no getting away from it. I had a situation personally with a family member, and I hated them. I had so much anger. I fantasized about their death. I fantasized about them moving away, never being in our lives again. And it was paralyzing to me. And did this person deserve my forgiveness? No. Did this person deserve my love? No. But I gave it for me. I had to. I had to dig in. And it literally took me a year. It took me a year to really release this anger, release this hatred. And now I feel like I can get through anything. If I could get through that, it just reminded me of how powerful I am to release and remove those negative behaviors and negative thoughts, because they're not serving me. And there was really no reason to hold on to that. And now I'm freer than I've ever been because I mastered that.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's a really tough one, actually, just to think about, like, letting go. And I guess like you said, it's different for everyone, and we all need to face our demons. And speaking of which, you did mention that when people are inflamed, when their brains are inflamed under sugar, I know that people who they go carnivore, and then if they do have a binge, they can feel it and they get really sad or depressed, and they just start to feel horrible again. Do you think this is something that's missed out in today's kind of psychology realm? Obviously, Jordan Peterson talks about it a lot, how the diet has saved him. But is this something that's being missed? The whole link between nutrition and neurotransmitter health and our gut health and this gut brain connection?
Oh, absolutely. And I am so beyond excited about this book. I haven't finished it yet, but
Brain energy.
Brain by Dr. Chris Palmer. He is an assistant professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and he has been treating people for probably 20 plus years with low carb uh, diet, removing the sugar, removing the processed foods. And he's having patients with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder resolve their symptoms. And there is a undeniable direct relationship. It's not even kind of. There is not one person who I have encountered who has struggled, removed sugar and processed food, and not said, I feel better. I feel more mental clarity. I feel happier. And then anyone who has increased their animal fat has definitely felt that. And I think that that's not talked about enough. I think that the carnivore world talks about protein, protein, protein. And that's great for a neurotypical person, but someone who is struggling with depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, they need fat. They need that animal fat in their brain. And I eat over a half a pound of fat every single day. I don't skip it. I don't miss it one day because I just know I need to stay in this elevated mood to accomplish all of the wonderful things that are before me.
That is incredible. So, yeah, at the moment you're still on very high fat. And I know you've mentioned how that works best for you or what you've seen for healing and how crucial it is. So, I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Why that could be and what you've seen?
Um, I just know by trial and error, not only with me, but with my clients. They come to me and some of them have been keto or carnivore. And then they're still struggling and I'll be like, what are you eating? And I'll look at it and I'm just like, actually, you could probably use some more fat. And they increase their fat and then they're like, it's so funny because they increase their fat like, gradually. And then they're like, and then they check in with me and they're like, I'm doing really good. I'm doing really good. I'm like, that's awesome. And then they'll be like, have a day. And they're just like, oh my gosh, my depression came back. I feel horrible. And I'm like, what'd you eat the day before? Oh, you know what? I didn't eat any fat. And I'm just like, hmm. They eat the fat, they immediately get back. I mean, it's like an an instant result. As soon as they eat enough animal fat, they feel better. And they're like, okay, note to self, like I get it now. I hear you now. But a lot of people just don't hear me. And it's okay. It's just that they need their own experiment. They need their own experience to be able to really understand, oh, my brain needs animal fat.
Okay, so you get people to adopt a more higher fat approach, but on top of the trauma that you're already working with, how do you get onto the diet? Because they're already dealing with enough. How do you convince people that this is the way forward and that this is one of the most key aspects of your healing?
Um, Thankfully, most people, whenever they get to me, they're already kind of aware. They're kind of aware that sugar and processed food is a problem. And so they're ready. They just are incapable of, like I said, stringing 3 or 4 days together. Um, so it doesn't take much convincing. Um, what I have found is that most people, I hate to say this, but if they're not willing to do this hard work, they're just not miserable enough. The people who come to me are very miserable. They cannot picture their life for 6 more months like this. They cannot imagine continuing like this. Like they are in pure torture and they don't want to exist. The people that come to me are not the people that are just like, oh, I would like to work on this. No, there's tons of other coaches out there, and they do great with that, and they can be in a big group and everything. The people that I work can't even, some of them can't even like show their face in a Zoom meeting. Not all of them, but a lot of them, they are so miserable that they are willing to do the work. And that's where I come in. And I'm so grateful. Like, I'm so grateful that I have this background, that I have my master's in clinical counseling, that I've practiced as a therapist. And so I recognize that I'm able to really meet people where they're at. And that's why there's room for all of us. There's so many other coaches out there who do a great job, but I just help the really, really tough cases.
Yeah, and that's amazing because not many people have your experience with this diet, and you yourself have got your own incredible story. So it's much easier for you to relate to people, I think, because you've actually been through it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because if you think about, going to a therapist and they're like, how does that make you feel? And you're just like, ugh. And me, I'm like, I remember that. I remember feeling like that. Like, I totally remember that self-deprecating emotion, and self like worthlessness and hopelessness. And I'm able to crawl into the pit with them and then show them the way out. And it is my life's purpose. And it is such a joy. Like, I literally love my job.
So, yeah, speaking of you, how did you find the strength? Because you didn't have a coach. So how did you find the strength to completely change yourself in your life like that?
Honestly, I believe it was a miracle. I believe that I was blessed. And I had this knowing, and it was a knowing that was so deep that it almost like compelled me each day. Um, Mind you, I was coming from absolute pure misery. I was either going to the nursing home or the psych ward, or I was going to commit suicide. So those were my options. So there was no going back. There was no like, I don't know if this is working. It was just like, this has to work. And I just kept going and kept going. And then whenever I got about 45 days in, I experienced joy for the first time since I can remember. I'm sure I experienced joy as a child, but I didn't remember it. And I was 40 years old and I experienced joy, and I was like, what is that emotion? Like, what is that feeling? And then I had hope for my future. Normally, I'm just surviving every day. I was in survival mode for 10 plus years, just trying to get through every day. And then now I've got a plan for tomorrow. Like, and then I got a plan for next week. Like, I just, it was such a foreign experience to me. And it just kept me going.
Is there a way for every single person on this earth at the moment who's suffering to find their kind of miracle and their true healing and, reach a state where they have hope and joy and they can dream of a better future and accomplish it?
I 100% believe that. I really do. I think that everybody has a different path in that it might not be carnivore. It might be that you eat high animal fat and animal meat, and then you incorporate pumpkin or sweet potatoes, or, I think that carnivore is a tool. It is not the goal. I believe it is a very effective tool to kind of clear out the noise. And then you can reintroduce one new food a week and find out what it is that was contributing to your, depression. Like, for instance, I had a accident. I was helping my son cook, and I had white potato. And the whole next day for 24, it bled into 48 hours. I had depression, and I
Wow.
hadn't experienced depression in 3 years. So it was enough for me to go, oh, I remember this feeling. Okay. And then I was just in bed for 24 hours. It was horrible. So white potatoes are not on the menu for me. I recognize that. But sometimes people can have other things and they're fine. But I do believe that this is for everyone if you seek it. You have to be so completely done and miserable. A lot of people, they just identify with their illness and they just stay there and they're like, this is my life. This is how I'm going to be. But the people who are like, no, I want out. I'm done. You know, I'm tapping out. Get me out of here. Those are the ones who find the answers.
And speaking of which, what came first? It's like a chicken or the egg scenario. Is it the food that made us like this, depressed and contributed to our trauma, our anxiety, all of these mental health issues? Or was it the trauma that then made us react so badly to all of the food that we shouldn't be having anyway, like the processed foods and the sugars and the refined grains?
I think it's a perfect storm, and I think it's a strategic storm. I don't want to get too much into it, but I believe that it was planned. It was absolutely planned that the powers that be knew that we were going to experience trauma, and then they concocted this perfect formula of fat, salt, and sugar. And they got us completely addicted to these processed foods, knowing that it was going to be our demise, that it was going to cause us more mental illness and metabolic illness, and that we were just going to continue to go down. And then that we were going to require pharmaceuticals, and that we were going to require more medical care. And so it was a perfect plan. So to answer that, I really think that it's both. It's the trauma. If we had trauma and we lived on a farm and we didn't have, TV, and we didn't have ads, we didn't have processed foods, and we were just living out in the middle of nowhere, I think we would recover. I think we would be fine. But when you throw that drug into the mix, it just exacerbates into this huge, huge snowball effect that is really hard to stop. And most people don't.
I 100% agree with you on that. And it's a really good point about the perfect storm. So tell me just kind of before we finish off, a lot of people might think that the Cornwall diet is restrictive and might actually lower your quality of life because you don't have, I guess, because people use food as a coping mechanism, they rely on birthdays, parties, drinks out with friends, sugar, essentially, this dopamine response. So what is life like as a carnivore who is incredibly happy? And, how do you get to that stage? And is it a restrictive diet or is it not a restrictive diet?
Yeah, I think it's really hard at first. I have a lot of clients the first 3 weeks that I'm just a punching bag. Like they just literally cry. And they're like, I miss my brownies, I miss my cookies. And I remind them, do you remember how you feel on them? Yes, yes, yes. And the ones that hold through, which they eventually get through that, they experience how good that feels. And then that sustains them. But it is very difficult going through that at the beginning. And I have found that for most people, they really have to want it. People that come to me are, like I said, are not people that are just like, oh, I'm just a little curious. Like, I just want to look into this. No, the people that come to me are like, hey, I'm gonna die. You're my last hope. That's what people tell me all the time. You are my last hope. One person said, I've been fighting this since I was 12 years old, and they're now like in their 50s. And they're like, there is no other way. There is no other way for me to just white knuckle it through this. you're my last hope. And thankfully, God has blessed me to be able to just operate in this, operate in miracles, because it is really a miracle whenever people get a new life, whenever they can transform, and really heal. And I think that's what takes over is the healing.
Yeah, and I guess the joy of not being inflamed anymore, which is really important, and you wouldn't believe how freeing that is. Um, so then, where can people find you, and what are you doing that people can kind of get involved in?
Yeah. So you can find everything at emilypenton.com. And I like to let people know up front, who I am and what it is to work with me, because I have a bunch of entry points. There is a free Saturday support group that is every Saturday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And that is open to the world. So if you go to emilypenton.com, just look for Saturday Food Support Group. And we record those and then we put them on YouTube. So even if you can't get to the meeting, you can watch the replays. And it is so powerful to have community, and to be able to talk to other people about this. And then there's a weekly coaching that I have. And this container is emails that I send out to you for the 8 weeks. And then you are able to ponder and reflect on them. And then you can meet with me in a group meeting. So that's weekly group coaching. And that is $1,800 for the 8 weeks. And then there's the individual coaching. And that's every single day. You get those emails out and you get 4 one-on-ones with me where we just go deep. We go into the deepest, darkest stuff that you've never told anyone, but it needs to get out. You just like a wound with the infection, like the pus needs to come out. You need to share this. And then I'm able to really love you through that process. And then you have daily contact with me. So you're daily able to send messages through. I have an app called Marco Polo. And it's a video messaging where you send me a video message and then I respond and send you a video message back. And that's $6,500. And like I said, both of those are for 8 weeks, but it's kind of a misnomer because the link for the weekly meetings is for life. Like you can jump back into that and we can have contact every week forever. I'm always going to give you that access to that Zoom link. And those meetings are powerful because you're hearing other people who are in the same desperate, miserable spot that you were, and they're thriving. And so it's really absolutely profound what has unfolded in Inner Clarity System.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, no matter what, I agree with you about community. People do need someone else to talk to and relate to, even if it's just someone who's going to listen to you, just to be heard. And I'll link everything that you've just mentioned below so people can go and find you and check you out, as well as the interview we did, so people can hear about you and, confirm that you are the real deal and that you have been through a lot yourself. And, look at you now, you're doing an amazing job. So, do you have any final words?
No, Annabelle, I'm so thankful for you. I'm so thankful that at your age that you have just been awakened. You have been open to this. And I'm so excited about the different, age group that you can reach to be able to prevent this. Like, because the people that are coming to me at like in their 50s and 60s, like, wouldn't it be great if they didn't have to suffer for 20, 30 years, that they could get this figured out now and not continue to reinforce that addiction. So thank you so much for your curiosity, your incredible questions, for wanting to talk to me. You are just such a gift to this space. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. All right, I'll catch up with you soon and have a lovely rest of your day.
All right, bye-bye.